Um, okay, good. Today we're going to talk about, last week we did like a landscapey kind of concept. Today we're going to do a really fun series of exercises that compile into a painting that I call my Tutti Frutti lesson, where we're going to be making a sampler, so to speak, rather than a still life, because a still life has too many things going on for a 1 hour class. You have to think about, you know, your composition and your elements and all those things that are much broader than what I want to achieve here today, which is to teach you how much fun it is to create organic shapes like fruits and vegetables with just a couple very simple concepts. And you don't even need a real live fruit or vegetable in front of you to do this, or a photographic resource. We're going to be playing with the knowledge that we have in our minds. So the first thing I want to take you through today, and make sure your paints are all fired up. They're all juicy. You've got your water ready. Let me tilt this down, see if I can bring it in.
Katie, for those of us that don't have kind of a palette that's always ready, can you just give us a hint while you're getting ready of the kind of colors we'll need? And
sure, thanks for reminding me. I have a squirt of alizarin crimson, which is my more maroony red. I've got cadmium red, which is like your fire engine. I've got opera, which is hot pink. I've got a sap green, a hooker's green, I believe it is, and two yellows, a yellow ochre. I've got a lemon yellow, a cadmium yellow, and some, you know what, I didn't put out a blue, but you know, I have a little bit of blue. I need to put out a blue. Let me see what blue I grab over here. Probably a cobalt or an ultramarine. What's coming at me here? French ultramarine. This is a Holbein. This is a little tube. I keep telling myself I am going to construct a palette that's very structured and follows a pattern like in my travel watercolors and the little Altoids tins that I showed you last week. All right, let me just put that there. So what I want to start with first is a very classic art school pear. I must have painted and drawn hundreds of pears in my lifetime, and they all come down to the same concept of it's just a circle with a triangle attached to it. And when I was teaching this, I'm going to make some mix up some yellowy green here. I'm going to make a green with blue and yellow. And I have some greens already mixed up. But I want a very pale yellow green to start with, a pale wash like this. See, not too dark, very pale, because we are not going to be using a pencil. We're going to be delineating our shape with our very wet, milky, washy brush. And we want to start the easiest thing with the pear. You're going to make a circle, and I don't want to do it too dark. And I'll tell you why in a minute. And I'm just going to put a triangle on the top of it, just like that. When I taught this to fourth graders, I said, it's a party hat. I mean, it's a cookie wearing a party hat. And you might not want to fill it in all the way. Leave a little splotch of white space there. Now, I should say, we're going to be doing a lot of little paintings. So if you're working on a big pad, you might want to section it off into squares. So because we're going to be doing some practice shapes. And It's easy to do a shape that's maybe the size of your fist or smaller. You want it to be bigger than a quarter, maybe the size of a golf ball or a tennis ball, but certainly no bigger than your fist. I might be doing this a little larger because I want to show you. So I kept it light with a wash because now I'm going to be introducing a couple other colors. I'm going to bring in maybe some burnt umber or burnt sienna. Now, you want to establish where the light is coming from because the bottom side of your pear is going to be darker than on the top where the light is coming from. So I'm just going to dabble in some colors and let them, whoops, that's a problem of holding this up to show you. I have drippage going on unintentionally because we don't work at such a severe angle. Some watercolorists work flat, but you can see when I hold this up,
What color did you use?
I used a yellowish green, and then over it, I dropped in some diluted raw umber,
Okay.
raw sienna, I think this says.
Yeah.
You know, just mixing your greens and browns because pears often have brown spots. They're wonderfully modeled. Your Bosque pears seem to have more brown in them. And I'm tilting my paper so the colors can mix and mingle. Pears can have a lot of orange in them. Maybe I'll dabble in some orange. Yeah, the Bosque pears are brownish and the Bartlett pears, I believe, are greenish. You can make your pear whatever variety, your own mutant variety if you want. So I might bring in just a little bit of orange, which I'm using a vermilion, which is a very warm, orangey kind of red. I'm going to bring in a little yellow, so it's not too strong, and just drop in and wash in. Might make a little splotches near the top. And what we're going to do also is when you've got some modelation or modeling of color and you're swirling it around, I'm trying to keep this drip from happening. If there's some areas that are too puddly, we can do what we can call lifting out, which is taking your brush and rinsing it off and then blotting it on a towel and then bringing it up to your paper and just using it is like you're going to dab it off, like if you were using a cotton ball to sponge. See, you're lifting out the color. Then wipe your, I got this drip that won't stop. And wipe your brush off and then go back in and use it to blot out some color if you want to lift off and remove some color. And watercolor, as I mentioned last week, like Picasso says, it does what it wants. I can't seem to tame this drip. But now I have some hard edges going on here that I want to soften. So if we want to soften an edge in watercolor, again, rinse off your brush. I have 2 water cups here. One for rinsing off my brush when I want to get rid of a color, then I dab it off. And then I have a clean one that I'm going to. Now, I want to always make sure I wipe my brush off so I don't get back runs or blooms. In this case, I don't want to encourage a bloom, but I do want to soften my edge. So you take a damp brush, not a really wet one, and you go in where the 2 colors meet, and you just kind of massage that hard edge and smooth it out. So kind of try and tease it into becoming smooth and blending so I don't have a hard edge there. I'm trying to get rid of that hard edge. Now on a pear, when you make your strokes, you want to follow the contour of the object. So my strokes might be semicircular and following the circular pattern of the pear. So now's the time I'm going to let this guy sit back and dry until we take him to the next level. So get ready to move on. Fix up your pear to a point where you're going to say, I'm going to let it dry because I'm going to talk about shadows in a little while. And you've got to have your pear object dry first before we get into the whole idea of the shadow. So now what I want to talk about is a basic shape that will take you to so many fruits and vegetables that we're going to play with today. And what it is, I'm going to mix up, I have like an orangey red here already. Maybe I'll use that because your juicy fruit mantra for today will be start with the heart. And what I mean by that is you basically, well, I'm going to work big. Oh my God, it's going to trip again. You basically draw a heart. See my heart? Now, depending on where you go with this heart, and it's hard for me to tilt it really up vertical because it's going to run. Where you're going to go with this heart depends on the color, how vertical or how horizontal and squashy it is, and what your greenery is going to be. And what I mean by that, with this heart, I can now start filling it in, get a little thicker paint there. And if I widen the bottom of my heart, I can have a pepper. If I make my heart fatter in the middle, I can have an apple. If I bring the point of my heart really down, I can have a strawberry. So depending on where you go with this heart and what you do with the color. Now, being that I have this red color, it's a very kind of like orangey strawberry. But working on that strawberry idea, because you know how strawberries have those little seeds or whatever they are, pocking their surface. I might come in with a different red or a stronger red, and we're going to see what happens here. I might do, whoops, it's a little goofy. I might do a couple like dots that will go on to suggest those seeds that seem to be appearing at the top of many strawberries. Not so, usually when we see strawberry, those little dark things are around the top. So I want to get some differentiation. I've got pretty much the same red going on there. So I might do some dropping out. I just rinsed off my brush and blotted it. And I want to follow the line of the fruit. So I might come in and I just might swipe up that way to lift off some of the color, to give it the little bit of unevenness and organic differentiation of color that you might find in these fruits and vegetables. And I might do that right around the top too, where you might see a highlight or the light hitting it. And now I'm just going to put this aside and let it straighten out that edge a little bit. Yeah, and play with my shape. And the great thing about these organic shapes is that no two are alike. Every strawberry is different. Okay, so we covered a pear. We covered using a heart to get us started with what we just did was the starting of a strawberry. If we want to do, let's say, a pepper, here I have a couple hearts that I've kind of worked into a pepper shape using the same kind of red and orange family. You can go in, and now the pepper has like grooves to it. You know how it's got like these, what do you call those? You know, there's some areas that are bumped out and some areas that are recessed, like little valleys, I guess they are. So you can bring in another color. I'm getting the drift again. Bring in another color. I'm going to have to make my, not use as much water and try and treat my watercolor like an acrylic here so it won't run down the page. Well, if I just bring it out to the side, whoosh, like that, I got the suggestion of a shadow, which is later in the lesson. But being that the drip is upon me, I'm trying to make it work. So I'm coming in with a slightly darker color and making like the affectation of those ridges that you might find on a pepper. So just like, just some vertical lines down the body and the belly. And when these shapes are dry is when we'll come in and do the leaf and the stem. Right now, on certain vegetables, it might work, like if the top of the, isn't a red pepper a green pepper until it gets riper? Something like that. I'm just going to try. I'm going to do where my stem is here. I'm going to make sure these run. See, now I put a little green in there and I'm letting it run. And we'll see what kind of trouble I can get in here. But yeah. And it's just following down and it'll dry like that. It'll mix and mingle, let it follow that little valley. So if we change our color and let's say we change our heart, and this time I'm going to stick with the red color, but instead of making an elongated heart, I'm going to make a heart that's short and squat, like a fat heart. Short and fat. Like that. Short and fat, not tall and skinny. Because now my short and fat heart, if I kind of flat out the bottom a little bit so it has itself to stand on, again, I want to make it a little fatter. A little fatter, like that. So I really rounded out the bottom. Now, depending on where I can go with this could be a tomato. Now, a tomato is not going to have ridges in it like a pepper or a pumpkin. So the modeling of the surface is not going to have a bunch of vertical lines that suggest the indentations. So I'm wiping off I'm blotting my brush because now, because this is all solid, I want to pick up some of this and I'm going to follow the line. See how I did? I just removed a little bit of color just to give it some differentiation before the whole thing dries. To give it some modeling, a suggestion of a highlight. Now the bottom of the fruit, because they don't really just float in space. They will eventually sit on a table or a shelf or in a bowl or a plate. The bottom is usually the darker part where it hits the surface it's resting upon. And the top is usually a little lighter. So I'm just trying to mix up the coloration where one side might be a little darker than another. And I might do one little drop, not making a leaf yet or any kind of stem, but one drop of green right at the tippy top where the valley of the heart meets. And then I'm going to set that aside and let that dry. Because we will be revisiting these, whether you're doing lots of little squares or individual pieces of paper. So I'm going to revisit that when that dries.
Katie, what's the complementary, the opposite color of red?
Green.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So when they mix together, sometimes the area between them becomes a neutral, like a grayish brown. And that is that's like what I'm going for here, is for them to mingle at that point.
Okay.
Katie, I missed your direction in the beginning. Is the paper supposed to be damp?
No, the paper is not supposed to be damp.
Okay,
We're working wet on dry at this point.
thank you.
Because we are kind of like painting, and we want our shape to be defined in space. We don't want it to be all amorphous like our skies last week, or we were trying to get the blur. We're trying to define these images in space. So we're working with wet paint on a dry surface. So if we continue and if we now mix a little bit of blue, I'm going to make a purple with blue and red, because now I'm going to make again that short fat heart, my short fat heart, and purple. And I'm going to fill it in and drop in different colors. And I'm just going to round out the bottom a little bit. Like that. Because, and I might just put a little bridge across the, where the heart apex or indentation is. Because now that we're bringing in the blues and purples, our chubby little heart here is now going to become a plum. And plums have wonderful colorations of dark purples and blues. So you can drop in different colors to suggest the purples or the colors that go on in a plum. And when it dries, we'll go over the different leaf shapes and stem shapes to add to our fruits. Now, this is one big fat plum. However, you could also take this and make a lot of little ones. These are cherries because I did them in reds and maroons, and I gave them a very long stem with my rigger brush in a dark brown, dark some light brown. Oh, this is what I want to show you. Let me rinse my brush on.
Can you
In
hold
this-
up the cherries again?
Say that again?
Hold up the cherries again, please.
Sure, there are the cherries.
Thanks.
They look great.
Okay, so now what I want to show you is this little sampler where we have this, because of the foliage, this lends itself to being an apple because it's got the apple leaves and the brown stem. Next to it, it lends itself to being a pepper because it's got the thicker green stem and some veining going vertically down it. This one lends itself to be a strawberry because we have that little starburst at the top of at the green with some of those dark seed things. We've got our plum, which is all purple. Oh, this seems to be reading dark. If I turn this on, will it give you a better light? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. And yeah, we got and then we've got the cherries. And this is a tomato because it's squat and it's got that kind of like spider web kind of thing. Oh, and then blueberries down here. Blueberries will be small. They'll be round and heart-shaped. The heart shape shows you where that little crown is, like when we do a blueberry. And also, if you're doing a still life, your blueberries are going to be much smaller than your plums. So depending on its relationship to the items around it, like if I were to do the same size as this tomato next to it and purple, you would say, okay, well, that's probably a plum. Make it a little darker. I'm adding blue and red together to make a purple.
And why do you do that instead of using a purple?
You can go out and buy every color in the rainbow if you like to collect colors, but I like to mix my own colors, and
Okay.
blues and reds will make a variety of purples depending on the blue you select and the
Yeah.
red you select. We'll get into warm and cool colors a little bit more later, but I prefer mixing my own. I do have a couple purples, but that's one of the colors that I think is more fun to mix myself than buy ready-made in a tube. Certain
Mhm.
colors like lavender, it's easy to buy. Now, if I were to make little hearts with these, with this blue purple color, that's going to suggest blueberries or huckleberries because of its size relation and proportion to the other fruits around it. And it's fun if you're going to make a series, like these could be grapes. The grapes are a little rounder sometimes. Grapes and oranges are pretty round. I find that the most variety you can get is just starting with a heart shape. And depending on the colors you use, and how you finish it off with a leaf and stem will identify it. Now, you could go on to make your own specialty, artistically generated or genetically modified by you fruit. Invent some new fruit or vegetable, fine. This is not about creating something that's entirely representational. It's your impression of a tomato or a plum or a blueberry or a strawberry without needing to have that item in front of you as a visual reference. You can work on memory and imagination for this. Okay. What I want,
Show us the blueberries again, just for a sec.
the blueberries. Okay. Here are the little blueberries. And they have that little crown on top. It's almost like, like a little princess crown with little spiky things with your brush, making a couple little, just make a little crown. Okay, now I'm letting my plum mix and mingle, turning the paper. Because this, even though this is a block, this happens sometimes. You might get a little valley in the paper where that pigment wants to settle. And you want to keep the paper moving. Because what happens sometimes is I walk away and the paint dries and I come back and I say, oh, I wish I had paid more attention to it in the moment, because now it dried in a way I didn't want it to. Happens all the time. So I'm just going in and softening some of these edges. There aren't too many hard edges on fruits and vegetables unless it's stripy, like a watermelon. I'm thinking of certain melons, like a delicata squash or something that definitely has some stripiness to it.
Maroon, you would do like a little bit of green into the red?
Say that again. You want to make a darker green?
No, how would you make maroon? Like you said, you used
Oh,
maroon.
maroon would be mixing red and blue to make a dark purple, but then adding more red to it. So it becomes maroony. If you have a Payne's gray, or you could even do a dot of green. I don't want green to make it muddy. I just want the green to make it a little deeper and darker for you.
Yeah.
Here on my maroon, this is the alizarin crimson with a little bit of ultramarine blue.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to add a little bit more red, so it's trending more maroon and like a dark wine color rather than purple. Let's see, I might drop that in over here. I'm probably going to get some blooms, but that could be interesting. Just adding some maroon to my plum. And then I'm going to let that dry. Okay, so if we go back maybe to our first pear. Now, if I can find it, what did I do with it? Here we go. Okay. It should be dry enough now. And I can go back and rework it because I want some deeper colors in there. I don't like it. I want to smooth that out. Yeah, make that a little smoother. Because now what I want to do, the bottom is dry enough to talk about shadow. See on this one, a shadow. A shadow is not necessarily gray. You know, sometimes when we think, oh, we got to add a shadow, I'll just mix up some gray. There's like some scientific color formula that the shadow is comprised of the color of the object that it's hitting and the color of the surface it's sitting on. It can make you dizzy. But basically, it's a darker version of the color with some of its opposite color thrown in. And you can play with shadows, and shadows basically want to follow the light. Now, on this particular pear I have here, let me get a pencil. Because it is lighter here and darker here, suggests that the light is coming from this direction. So I'm just going to put an arrow there. And sometimes artists do mark on off to the side or in the margin to remind themselves where the light is coming from. In this case, it's coming in an angle. So the light will follow the line of your shadow is going to follow the line of the light. So the shadow is going to come over this way. It's going to be working like this. If the light is coming this way, the shadow is going to be over here. Now, the shadow is not going to be wider than the object itself. It's only going to be as wide as the widest part. But again, depending on the time of day, this is coming in on an angle. So our shadow is going to be on an angle. If it was the middle of the day and the light was coming straight down, our shadow would be directly centered under our object. So what I'm going to do is take a darker color, and I'm going to take that, whatever I used here, like some this burnt umber. I'm just going to gray it up by adding some red and some blue. And I'm going to get a neutral. When you mix all three primary colors together, red, blue, and yellow, you will wind up with a neutral. This is like a brown tea color, maybe. I'm just going to load up my brush, and I like to use a big brush. It keeps you loose, because now I'm going to, and I think it's dry enough, I'm going to do the shadow underneath, and I know it's going to go this way. So let me do it this way. It's not, I'm doing it upside down here to show you. Tilt it up.
We can't really see it, Katie,
All right.
unfortunately.
So this is, let me make it darker. Come on, yo. I'm just making it in the brown family. It's going to start under my pear. And because the pear gets fatter, I'm going to come in a little tighter there. But it's never going to be wider than the pear itself. And also, depending on the light, it's going to be darkest, the shadow is going to be darkest where it hits the object. So I'm going to add a little bit darker, and it will run, but I think I'm just going to like spot it there, right around the edge, and let that mix.
Can you hold it one more time, please?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, it's running, so I'm
Okay.
just trying to tame it. I'm trying to figure out how to get my Mac set up where I can get the overhead camera.
Yeah.
I can do it with my phone, but I can't, I need like a split screen. I need like a whole TV studio in here. But the other thing I want to show you also is a very easy way to make a shadow is load up your brush, and right from underneath, I'm going to work on this little pepper here. I'm just going to make a stripe, one decisive stroke. Watercolor, less is more. You overwork it, you ruin it. So I'm going to try and be bold here and just
We
make
couldn't see
one.
it, Katie, sorry.
Okay, I'm just going to make it one stroke.
Gotcha.
And now it affects a shadow. And it doesn't have to mimic the shape above it. It can be one thick stripe. Like in this painting, even though this isn't watercolor, the shadows are just thick stripes going off to the side. And it gives you the suggestion of a shadow without being worried, oh, does it emulate, does it perfectly the shape? No, you're just suggesting the shape by doing one from the bottom of your shape out. Now, because we, like in our sampler kind of thing here, oh, I dripped on it. There's always something. Okay, in our sampler, you could make, and I was looking for like a square. I only found a round coaster. I said, fine, my little cubbies or whatever, my little sections will be circles. You could grid off a piece of paper like this here, where I have 4 different ones. And I'm going to do 4 different heart shapes here. I'm going to make this nice and thick. I don't want it to run. So in this box, I'll make a heart just like that. I don't want it to run. And I'll fill it in, but I'm not going to fill it in totally, because see how I left some white spots? I wanted to give the impression of a highlight. In watercolor, we don't want to use white paint if we can not, because first of all, white watercolor paint is too translucent. It just doesn't even serve a purpose. Many artists use white gouache or even white acrylic paint on top to try and create a highlight after the fact. But you can also create a highlight by just not painting that area. Now you can get this stuff called Frisket, or what do I call it? Frisket. But what it does, it's like it's a gummy substance that will it's like liquid paper. Remember that stuff with whiteout we used to use? This is like liquid glue. And let's say I wanted to have little white dots. I would paint them on with this glue first, let it dry, and then you go over it with your paint. When that dries, you rub it off. It's like rubber cement or some kind of, gooey stuff. And then your white appears. You want to preserve your whites in watercolor, and use the paper to be your white. So now on my little sampler here, I'm going to make another heart. This time it's going to be green. There's my green heart, just like that. And I'm going to make it a little fat on the bottom, so it will become eventually my green pepper. Just like that. This is going to be a strawberry. That red one is heart, because the strawberries have more of a point to their bottom. They're not always pointy. So now on the bottom, I'll do 2 stubby or chubby, fat and short hearts. And one will be my plum. And you know what you could also do? I just thought of it. You could use one of these short and fluffy hearts in peachy colors. Don't they make those great donut peaches that are shaped like that? And peaches have great coloration. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to try and make one of those little donut peaches. And they're a fair color, yellow, orangey. They don't get that dark. So I'm going to start with, oh, that's really orange. So there's so much you can do with that basic heart shape without having to look up a photo reference. Now, if you do want to find a photo reference, may I suggest to you a site called Pexels, P-E-X-E-L-S. They have free to use photographs from photographers all over the world. If you use the photograph, you're expected to note the photographer, photo referenced by, Joe Smith. And you have the option of making a donation to that photographer. So that's a great site for free imagery. Let's say, you want to draw some flowers or paint some flowers, which is always, to me, the most fun to do from life. I love painting flowers, but I like to have a bouquet in front of me. So I'm going to let these little squares, I've got my 4 hearts there. I'm going to let those dry a little bit because there's not much I can do when they're wet. Well, maybe I won't look. I just do this all the time. Maybe I'll go back in and add a little yellow right there. Yeah. Okay, good. Let that dry. Set that aside. All right. The other thing I want to talk about now is, remember how we said that the pear is just a circle with a triangle attached to it? A lemon is a circle that just has 2 triangles attached to it. So it's just it's just the same idea. A banana is a rectangle with 2 triangles on each end. But what I want to talk about now is qualifying these items in space. This is floating. This is a lemon that's just floating out there. It has no sense of gravity. It has no relationship to the world around it. The easiest way you can establish an orientation in space for your items is to, and it depends on where you're going to draw your line, where you're going to make your line. I'm not even going to use a pencil. I'm just going to come in halfway down through my shape with a contrasting color, and I'm going to use it as the wall behind this lemon. And this lemon is sitting on a table. I'm just going to go around my lemon with a color. And just by doing that, I have now given this a sense of placement in the world. So if I tilt it this way, it might run. But even if I flip it upside down, gives you the same idea. This is now grounded somewhere in space. It's got a qualifying life around it because we have dealt with the negative space around our object. The negative space is the negative shape is a shape in and by itself. This shape, this blue shape, is our negative space. So what I'm going to do now is just do a shadow underneath. I'm gonna emulate that same color, and being that the light is on the top, pretty much in the middle of my lemon, I'm going to create a shadow underneath it, if I could show you without.
So your color isn't supposed to be a table so far. It's supposed to be the wall behind it. Is that your thought?
Right. Now I've got a shadow under my lemon. I'm going to pick out some of that color so it doesn't drip too much. And because the light is coming from right above, like right above, the shadow is directly under the lemon. It's not coming in from the side like it's coming here. This is just coming directly on top. So that's something to play with also. Something fun to do is playing with shadow and where the light is coming from. So like on our sampler, they're just floating in space. They're just, you know, dancing around in their own little orbs, which is fine. Yeah, to do a sampler kind of thing. Like I'm doing here. I have these 4 sections where I did my hearts. Now I might go in and if I'm doing this section thing, I don't feel the need, like the sampler, I don't feel the need to do a shadow. But if I just had that lone fruit there, I wanted to give it a sense of space. That's why I added that horizontal line and a shadow, and that helped establish it in space. Here, I don't love these shadows, but this is to give you an idea of a sample of having 3 objects at different angles. I've got 2 peppers that are pretty much upright and 1 guy that fell over. He's long like one of those hot peppers. Anyway, I don't love the shadows on this one, but I think you get the point. That once you start making your shapes, they can float around in space. You can anchor them with a wall or a tabletop. You can give them a shadow. I will be teaching a drawing class in April, again via Zoom, because who knows what's going on in this world come April. So we will be going over things more like light and shadow and texture. Oh, something else I want to note. On your fruits and vegetables, especially something like a lemon, because sometimes a lemon has a little stippled surface. You could come in, maybe I'll do that now. You can come in with some splatters. And because I'm not the greatest at controlling my splatters, what I usually like to do is, I don't need that in water, is make a little protective area. Like I'm going to cover up the area around the lemon before I start splattering, because then I'll get it all over the place and I might not want it everywhere. Can you see it? I put it here. Yeah. All right, let me do that. So I'm going to take different scrap paper because I don't want my splatters going everywhere. So I'm covering up. More scrap, more scrap. I'm covering up everything but the lemon. I just put little pieces of paper around there. And I don't want to use a big brush because a big brush is going to give me big fat splatters. I don't want polka dots. I want like those little marks that you see on lemons or fruit. You see them on pears also. Let me see if I got a good color here. Yeah. So now I've got a nice juicy brush loaded up with some raw sienna. And I'm just going to tap my brush over my knuckle because I want to get some splatters. Okay, but I don't want to overdo it. Then I gently lift off what I masked off. And now you can see I've got some splatters on there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't love that every splatter is a little dot. So I might come in with a wet brush and just smush it a little bit to give it a little squash. So not everyone is the same. That some of them are darker than others. Some of them are a little misshapen and not perfect dots. There, I'm gonna let that rest. Okay. So let me see if I covered every word in my notes. I got everything buried here. Okay, good. So we covered that the heart shape will give us all kinds of fruit shapes. And it is the topper that determines if it's going to be an apple or a tomato. Over here, I have a tomato. So what tomatoes have at the top, they have that, they're not leaves that stick up like an apple. They are almost, I don't know what are they, like a tendril, but they actually go into the tomato. You know, don't they like stretch into the tomato? They don't so go up so much like an apple would. Or even over here, our plum leaves project up from the fruit, where the tomato kind of grips into the fruit. And a tomato also is on a vine, or comes from a vine. So those connections are kind of brownish. So I'm going to switch to a little bit of brown here. And they're kind of jaggedy. You know, like when you take the tomato off of a vine in the supermarket, they're kind of jaggedy, branchy things. Like little sticks. Whereas our plum has a real leaf kind of finish to it. Oh, and on the pear, where's our pear? On the pear, when we want to make that little stem coming off of our pear, what I like to do is to take a rigger. Where's my rigger? I have many riggers, but how come I can't find the one I want? Here we go. A rigger is your long skinny brush. Not skinny like that. It makes a rat's tail. And the pear, their little end is usually brown. And we want to think about how it grows out of the pear. So I'm not going to do it on the edge where the pear meets the background. I'm going to come in maybe a 1/2 inch or so. So it's embedded there in the, like in the top. I'm going to give it a little squidgle and bring it up like that. Just like that, just like bring it up with a whisk, with a brisk kind of stroke. Just bring it up like that. So it's got a little bit of an indentation where it meets the pear. And you could even create like a little like shadow or indentation, like where the nipple, what's the word the navel, where kind of like the navel of the stem. And I might want to drop in a little darker color there. So it's not just one shade of brown. There's like some, almost like a grayish color going in there. I did that swash upside down, so I didn't love that. So you just come in and you make your pear stem. And when that's dry, I could come in and make a couple of green leaves. Okay. Oh, and on the blueberries, I'm gonna make a giant one to show you. The blueberries have just a little crown on them. Here, I'll use this on that. We're gonna pretend this is our blueberry. And the top of the blueberry just has a little crown, which is like a greenish, brownish color. And it's like little prongs, like a little princess crown at the top, just like that. Maybe add a little green to the bottom of it, so it mixes and mingles. And I'm sure if you look up these images, you can find more representations of these fruits and vegetables. Yeah, just like a little tufty thing on the top, and you've got the crown of your blueberry. This is dry enough. Yeah. On the strawberry, my red heart here, the strawberry, the top of a strawberry has, it's kind of like a tomato in that sometimes these are stuck to it, where it's branched out, where it's almost like a star shape on the top there. Oh, and it's dripping. Never fail. I tried to do it really thick too, so it wouldn't. Oh, well. And then what you can do is take a really dark red, maybe add some brown or some Payne's gray to it so it's almost black, and then come in and make those tiny dots, those little tiny dots on the top of the strawberry. And they can be scattered. They don't have to be uniform at all. They're just going to come in and do that. The green pepper usually has a stem that's green too, but it's not really thin like the cherry. It's a little thicker. It's a little more stout. So we're going to give that just a little thicker green brown top on the green pepper. Oh, and my plum ran down the page. Okay. Well, I'm looking at my clock. I'm overshooting my hour here. I'm sorry. I will be sending you the link again to the recording, so you'll be able to review everything. I would love to see your samplers. And what I did here also is I just came in, did a little journaling. You know, I wrote tomato and cherries, and I gave it a little bit of a background, and I just gave them circles just to unify them together on a page. But I'd love to see what you've done. You don't have to be shy. You can send me your paintings and I can help you out with them if you have any questions. I won't share them unless you want me to. Oh, good. Let me see. Hold that up again, Eileen. Oh, great. I love what you girls are showing me. Debbie, Rita, I love this stuff. Oh, I love how you did the bunch of grapes. Ah, this is fabulous. Good. Have fun with it, girls. You'll be hearing from me later, if not today, then tomorrow. And we'll do it all again next week. Any questions before we close? Okay. Thank you for your time and your interest. I appreciate it. Thank you. See you next week.
Thank you.